Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our last Landcare Checks in for 2025. I hope everybody's had a lovely morning so far, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us. I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to Vanessa, who's here from the WOLN team, who's joining us today, and anyone who's joined the session from outside WA, welcome. So before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that I live and work on Whadjuk Noongar Boodja, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present. I extend a deep respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders on the call today, and I acknowledge their ongoing connection to land, sea and sky as the world's oldest continuous living culture. So please feel free to acknowledge what country you're all on in the chat function. So today's workshop is a dive into a couple of invasive species that wreak havoc not only in WA, but across the continent. The presence of invasive species has consistently been identified as one of the most significant threats to WA's native species and ecosystems. And as such, the Australian government has identified foxes, feral cats, pigs, and rabbits as a key cause of the extinction and decline of dozens of native animal species across Australia. But to be honest, you probably all already know that. And so today we have two representatives working in Western Australia's Wheatbelt and Southwestern regions, respectively. And we are going to be hearing about their experiences, and then we'll have lots of time for Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions during either of the presentations, please write them down or just pop them in the chat and we'll get to them in the Q&A session. So without further ado, I would love to introduce our first speaker, Jacquie from Wheatbelt NRM. Jacquie has a degree in botany and zoology with a passion for Western Australian wildflowers and photography. She loves walking in the bush exploring and leads wildflower walks for community members in her spare time. Jacquie has worked for Wheatbelt NRM since late 2010. She's worked in all the major departments of Wheatbelt NRM over the years, except for accounts she says, no thank you. And in 2013, she took over the running of the Red Card for Rabbits and Foxes program. Jacquie became interested in rabbit management through her love of wildflowers and believes that rabbits have the greatest impact on threatened species of the big three of rabbits, feral cats, and foxes. However, she says if you just concentrate on rabbit management, feral cats and foxes prey switch to native animals, which she also doesn't want impacted either. Thus, the Red Card for Rabbits and Foxes is the perfect combination of integrated feral animal management and also creates connection within the local community, which Jacquie is extremely passionate about. Welcome, Jacquie. Got it.
Sorry about that, people.
Absolutely okay.
I discovered some new things about Zoom that I didn't know about before. Okay, I'm just going to talk very briefly about Red Card for Rabbits and Foxes. It's a community integrated feral animal management project which runs from Geraldton through down to Esperance, and the target species are rabbits and foxes and feral cats, with an emphasis on feral cats. Now, how it works is that we've got a website, which I haven't put on here, but if people want to write it down, it's www.redcard.org.au, and I can send that through to Eve so that she can distribute it later on. And on that website, there's a multitude of pages, but the most important ones are registration of events and results. And then there's other pages that tell people how to do things. What happens is that, just say the town, I live in 2J, someone in 2J decides they're going to host an event to cull feral foxes and rabbits and cats, and they list on the website that they're going to host the event. That doesn't mean it's a free-for-all for everyone to come and join in. People need to ring up the person who's put their name down as the organiser, and they will say, we've got room for, say, 12 teams from outside of our area to participate, and they will tell you when they've got enough teams. And so you might, when you try and participate, get told that there's no room for safety reasons. Anyway, this is just tackles one method of managing foxes, which is through shooting. We also strongly encourage management of foxes through baiting using 1080, and we have what was called a 1080, which is what's called the hot baiting period, which runs from February to the end of April every year. this task has more fallen with the more stringent requirements that have developed over the past 15 years or so for the management of 1080. A lot of this responsibility has passed off onto the regional biosecurity groups where they exist, and the red card aspect of the program focuses more on the shooting activities with people coming out from the city and joining in regional community shoots. The shoots take place between so the first model of red card for rabbits and foxes was developed in the late 90s, where Landcare groups collaborated with the then Agricultural Department and formally became named as Red Card for Red Fox, I think, initially in 2004. Wheatbelt NRM and other natural resource management organisations across the southwest of the state have been involved in it since the start, and from 2008 to 2013, Wheatbelt NRM managed a subcontractor who ran the program, or a couple of subcontractors over that period of time, but brought it into in-house in late 2013, which is when I started doing it. Long-term statistics. Since 2014, there's been 399 community events involving 328 groups, not all individual groups, but I mean, some groups participated, but they've all combined to be 328 groups involving just over 10,000 people. One of the things they do is they put their results up on the web page. It used to be manually done, where I sat there and processed sheets of paper as they came in, but we now have apps and things on the web. Well, we have things on the website. Maybe one day we could get an app where people put in how many of each they've culled and how many people were involved. And the people involved also includes the people who do the shooting, the driving, the spotlighting, organising the barbecue and counting up the dead bodies, etc. So 26,000 rabbits, just under 41,000 foxes and 2,500 cats have been culled in that period of time by members of the community. And I did a big write-up last year for State NRM on the effectiveness of red card, and I haven't got the figures to hand, but we did do figures on the economic impacts of each of those on agriculture and the environment. And we had an extensive survey throughout the community. That report is available on the Red Card website if anyone's interested in seeing it. Next year's dates have been set. We are currently looking for a sponsor for Red Card. We were sponsored by the Sporting Shooters Association, but because of their various other engagements at the moment, they're no longer able to support the event. What happens is that by $6 from each animal culled is tallied each for foxes and cats. There's $6 per fox, $6 per cat, to a capped amount of $25,000 is donated to Regional Men's Health Initiative. 20,000 goes to Regional Men's Health Initiative, and $5,000 comes to Wheatbelt NRM for the administrative. And also we have small community grants that go out to the groups that are holding their events. So, for example, I don't know, a local supermarket in a small town gets hit a lot for donations for various community events. And so it helps out the local community so that they can still have sausages, or like last year one group got a marquee, and just different things we support to help keep these events going. Another method of managing foxes is through trapping. We use cage traps at Wheatbelt NRM. Also, all the biodiversity projects at Wheatbelt NRM have a feral animal management component. So, and some of the sustainable agriculture ones that are protecting, doing a buffer zone of vegetation around a biodiversity asset, and they do cage trapping, baiting, and a combination of shooting with the landholders, and that's a generic part. Another way of managing foxes is den destruction. So you need to know where they're going, and you can fumigate their den with phostoxin and then destroy the den after the animal has been disposed of. And that's a very quick wrap up of what we do. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jacquie. I'm sure we'll be able to discuss it a bit more in the Q&A session as well. I've definitely got a couple of questions. Now I'm going to hand over to our second speaker, Kate from Leschenault Biosecurity Group.
I've lost the stop sharing. There it is. Okay. It's come back. No, come back here.
Okay. Just press escape. There
it's gone.
You got it.
I'll have a crack, Jacquie. Thanks for doing it first. So we can try and follow your great effort. I enjoyed that presentation.
Thank you, Kate.
Have a look. All right.
Looks good. I'm just going to quickly introduce Kate. So Kate is an environmental scientist who has worked in the southwest farming sector for the past decade, liaising with land managers regarding catchment health and management, and managing on-ground invasive species and aquatic health programs. So Kate started with LBG in 2021 as a project officer in the weed space, and has graduated through the vertebrate program manager to her current role as executive officer. Living for 30 of her 40 years in the dairy farming town of Dardanup, Kate is passionate about the people-led approach when it comes to declared pest management, as well as constantly learning from land managers and endeavouring to find ways to build community capacity through delivery of LBG's operations plans to resource cooperating land parcels with integrated pest management tools and processes. Kate spent 2022 to 2023 as the secretary for the now defunct WA Feral Pig Advisory Group, and was privileged to present on community engagement at the National Feral Pig Action Plan Conference in Cairns that year. She is also the vice chair for the Harvey River Restoration Task Force, and in her spare time, Kate enjoys fishing and falling off her skateboard. Welcome, Kate. I love that last bit.
Thank you. It's one sport where your progress is the more you fail at it, the better you get. But
so true.
I'm not getting anywhere with it. Thanks so much to WA Landcare Network for inviting me to present today. And thanks, Jacquie, for blazing the trail there. Our operations would love to have some sort of involvement or coordination or get involved with red card management, particularly for foxes. But we'll just we'll put that in the future in the future plans for us at the minute. But that was pretty inspiring, your Prezi. So thank you for sharing that. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about one of our operational programs and just contextualise what our group does, who we are, where we are, and mindful that there's attendees from interstate who might not have much knowledge of how declared pest management happens from WA's side of things. So, and we'll pick out one of our management programs, which is Hog On. So I was remiss in not putting the trademark next to any of the wording for Hog On you might see in my presentation, which is a bit naughty because it is a commercially available product. So, right, cracking off, Western Australia, little overview here, just to establish context. So Leschenault Biosecurity Group is one of 14. It says registered biosecurity groups, but that's my typo, recognised biosecurity groups in Western Australia. So these groups are community-led, volunteer-run, governed bodies that applied to be incorporated under the Associations Incorporation Act and are now recognised for the Minister for Agriculture to deliver operational services and access funding from the state's declared pest account. So it's a little bit different. It's, there's a matching contribution made from the state government from private levies raised across the various regions here. I'm just going to have a crack at putting the, can you see my mouse, folks? Is that moving around there? That hopefully is good enough for a pointer. When we zoom in, our little group's down here. You may notice there's a fair bit of white space in the southwest of the state. It's almost a perfectly complete puzzle piece, but local government authorities were engaged whenever the respective groups got up and running and had a say in whether they wanted to be involved with being part of an RBG. And so where there's white space, it usually means there was, you know, a decision for those councils not to vest in the program, and that's how it's landed. Here's a really loud map of drilling into our little piece of the pie. Yeah, safe to say we've evolved a little bit with the map development since this one was done, but it's pretty good capture of some of the localities where we operate. And we don't have a unified, comprehensive boundary around the whole of the Shire of Donnybrook Baling Up, which would be one of our participating LGAs that does have probably the highest prevalence of feral pig activity. So we share a common boundary with the Blackwood Biosecurity Group, who are fantastic at running their pig management programs, leaning heavily into LPMTs endorsed with 1080 use, other programs there. They've had a little bit of a play around with hog on, but it's really tricky country compared to what our operational area is, with a lot of forested areas, which maybe, and they've also got that portion of Wheatbelt sort of land holdings there up around, you know, getting towards Darken, which lends itself to maybe different control tools. But that's sort of a summary of our operations, and more specifically, what our group uses its funding in its annual operation plan to do is really try and lean heavily into building community capacity for private landholders. So anyone who exists within our operational area that might be having a developing problem with, let's just say, feral pigs, because that's what we're talking about today in my presentation, but maybe has not had experience in the past with managing them, or used to have a way that they could manage that is now not an option, i.e. we know that there's rules around 1080 usage now and property sizes do drop, and in the past people may have had permits and expertise using that sort of approach, but maybe now they can't. So our gig is to essentially try and find opportunities for filling the void with management tools that aren't as restricted, or perhaps there's a workaround to using it. And it doesn't mean that it's any less risky. In fact, it could be the opposite. However, we try really hard to lean heavily on industry best practice and engage really closely with LPMTs, suppliers, and end users as well, to make sure that we're protecting the social license around any sort of lethal control when it comes to declared pests. Our group also has a really skillful, oh, it's remiss of me to not acknowledge we've got a fantastic weeds officer who, you know, works, whether he'd like it or not, does delve into pig territory, as we may, if you've got blackberry in your backyard or in your area where you're currently phoning in from, you may note that pigs do tend to favour harbourage in blackberry. So invariably there may be a aligned control program to help reduce feral pig prevalence, and that might just be targeting one of their harbourages, for instance, and it's probably the same for foxes and rabbits as well. Our teams, I've got a background in environmental science. Our weeds officers honours in environmental management, and we've got a very savvy comms officer who has a strong background in international contract management and community engagement. So we hope that if someone approaches the group, we can, we won't assume to know everything about their request, but we hopefully can put you in the right space to try and get a resolution that's going to work for you long term and cost you the minimum in your own resources, whilst also contributing to the community-led aspect of declared pest management. Hog on and calicivirus programs, that's about my fourth point down there. They're probably our two flagship pillars of our operations plan, and we've spent a hell of a lot of time trying to get to know what rabbits are doing in our area and trying to encourage people to get on board with broad scale pre-feeding programs to introduce biocontrol. But watch this space, because I don't think we'll have a new biocontrol anytime soon, so we might have to look at getting involved with different sort of bait introduction methods. I'm going to pop over here and show you a little video now. It's a bit different. I'm usually used to presenting in real time to people, and I can ask questions of the audience and get people's takes on what they're seeing and whatnot, but you'll have to bear with me. I'll just keep toddling along here. So what you can see, if you haven't seen it already, in the bottom of the image there, we've got a hog on bait box, which is the white thing. We can see the animals lifting the lid there. Some really precariously banged in star pickets. And we've got a sounder of pigs here. So the composition of these individuals, there's a couple of boars in there. There's looks to be a sow, and we've certainly got some very little piglets. So why did Leschenault Biosecurity Group lean so heavily into hog on as a management tool when it was first going through its approvals? For a large part of our operations area, it's heavily forested at the interface between private agricultural land and then state forest. And we are all burdened with the constant question of who owns the pigs, whose problem are the pigs. Our group's approach is that, well, if the pigs are coming onto your land, it means you've got something of immense value to them that they're enjoying. And we understand they may be coming from the neighbours or from Crown Estate or whatnot. Given the density of that landscape and the lack of understory resources, if you're in the business of trying to introduce bait management or an oral exposure route for managing your target species, and you've got the tasty asset, you're in a prime position to be able to have a good, manageable outcome on reducing damage to your asset. So RSPCA and ground shooting, we heartily endorse responsible ground shooting of feral pigs. However, we have had a lot of reports in our operations area that what may happen if people endeavour to pursue pigs outside of where they may have access, it tends to split up the groups of pigs and can actually, it just impacts the pig's appetite to want to be around humans. And what we want with hog on, for instance, or any other bait exposure methodology, we want those pigs to be so comfortable. We almost want them to keep coming back to where they are. So we found that using a system like hog on, or even if you were going to look at the 1080 baiting route, something like that, aggregate feeding is a core part of that process. So trying to cluster feed the animals to where you want them so that you can introduce the next control. These statistics here, I'll credit our ex-project officer Shannon, who did this slide for me. And so I apologise, the stats might be a little bit out of, a bit old, about a year old, but I wonder who counted those 24 million pigs. I suspect that an old statistic I recall is that for every human, there's at least 2 feral pigs in Australia, with the majority clustered into tropical northeast Queensland. And I think we all know the impacts, Eve, you touched on at the start. There's impacts to industry, primary production, ecological damage, big concerns around disease movement, because feral pigs are a fantastic vector for many and a host for many problematic diseases that would pose huge biosecurity risks to our country if they couldn't be managed. So foot and mouth disease is still a big concern. In the southwest, where we've got the Mediterranean climate, and sorry to rub it in, Jackie, and anyone coming from the Wheatbelt, we are spoilt and privileged when it comes to surface water and groundwater. But we've also got a hell of a lot of dieback prevalent in the landscape. And I agree with Jackie that nationally, rabbits are probably the biggest threat to conservation. But I think if you Google the EPBC top 15 threats, you'll find that dieback's number 2. So pigs are a known vector for spreading dieback as well. They do tend to love eating opportunistic feeders and can certainly survive where the majority of other herbivores may not. So they can have that switching diet where they'll pick over small reptiles and amphibians, eggs, worms, flipping over cow bats, you get beetles, things like that. And the notorious rooting, I'm not sure if you see that little picture there in the bottom, that's only a snippet. I wish I'd put some bigger pictures in. Really hard to gauge with the eye how much damage one pig can do. And quite often, if we're having an engagement with one of our landholders, it's the first time they've noticed a digging like this, they might say, oh my gosh, it must be 100 pigs. And we'll say, all right, let's get you hooked up with a camera and some pre-feed. Let's see what we can determine, because a few pigs can make quite a big difference. And the onion grass, oh my gosh, do they love to hoover that up as well? which I guess is, you know, if you're trying to remove onion grass, that's great, but it's going to take all your productive pasture as well, and smashing into hay paddocks and things like that. I dread to think about the wheatbelt management of pigs, Jackie, just regarding those canola and wheat crops. There's just no visibility for things, and yeah, trying to get your feral pigs to eat on your pre-feed must be an absolute challenge in those environments. So we're back in, or we tend to offer hog on as a service for our customers. We're sort of exploiting some understandings that we think we have. Again, I think the pigs are nearly as smart as people at this point, certainly when it comes to being trap, bait, gun, vehicle shy. I'm just going to credit some of the radio collaring research that Department of Primary Industries did a few years ago. Peter Adams was good enough to let me borrow some of his overlays. We talk about boars, okay? So in-house, operationally, when we first started using hog on, it was probably around 2020, I think, when it first came into WA and got all its APVMA approvals. We were basically deploying it as the first management option for any number of pigs. That could be one solitary boar up to sounders of 30 pigs. What we've tended to notice, and we've refined the program delivery over the last few years, the boar's home range is far in excess of what those sows are in our experience. And again, there are anomalies to this theory. So this is just tracking the movement. So that's the outside perimeter or boundary of the movement of this boar, this particular collared boar called Boris. We've got some little pockets here, and I'm just assuming that people can see the mouse. But you'll notice when I progress a bit faster, because I'm chewing into everyone's time here, that perhaps Boris was in pursuit of a certain sow called Molly. And so his movement pattern tended to focus around where the sows were present. Classic bloke. He was on the prowl. He was looking for food. He was looking for girlfriends. He was casting his Tinder location to something like 2,500 hectares. Molly's was only set to 190, but rest assured he did find her. Oh, he missed her that time. But the sows being heavily reliant on resources, and generally in our operational area, those resources exist on private tenure. So that could be those paddocks, cropping, truffles, avocados. You know, yeah, seasonally you might get different influences when it's dry. A lot more presence of pigs wallowing at dams, etc., smashing into the irrigation lines. But they are driven by that desire to procreate, and they need resources to do it. So boars have a wide-ranging movement, which means it's a bit challenging to try and target them with a cluster feeding or an aggregate feeding program. Just to give it a bit of local context, if anyone playing along at home is from the southwest or is familiar with the Donnybrook sort of Preston Valley, we just overlaid with as much scale as we could the little diagram there to show that with these little parcels, your pigs could be in and out faster than you could react in terms of if it was quick, go grab the gun, or oh, yep, I'm going to go call Joe from up the road and his boys are going to come and get him. By the time you've sighted that pig, it might be kilometres away. So this is a video of an orchard in Kirra, and so orchards tend to be a favoured hangout location for some of the feral pig mobs, and naturally there was a few windfall apples and pears and other things there. So there's some really interesting things happening. You can see there's a saddle back there. We noticed quite a bit of colour variety in the pigs coming into our ops area. They're not all black. Some are virtually so pink you might think they've just wandered off from a piggery. And so there's questions there about how that's happening, and, you know, is there any nefarious activity going on in terms of relocation of pigs? And actually there's a pretty good article that was just published with some of the DPIRD WA staff and the New South Wales DPI on anomalies in feral pig movement in relocated animals, and that's worth checking out. I'll see if I can share that with you all in a bit. How do we start? So let's say we've someone's reported some pig diggings to us, the first thing we would generally suggest is if you've got some flaked barley, and again, this approach won't work for everybody because it's really sort of provincial and pigs will eat what they favour in any particular environment. If they've got access to some flaked barley, a plastic tub and a bit of molasses will encourage them to, if they have time to ferment a little bit of that, pour half a bag in, get that going. We'll try and whiz out and get them hooked up with a camera, trail camera if they haven't got it. And we'll just start by dumping the pre-feed, putting a trail camera on. Why do we do this? Because the cameras give us all the information we would need to make the decision to make the next step in the management program. It may not be that hog on's the best option, but in this scenario, we'll talk about that. We might find it's that solitary boar and they come for a couple of nights, disappear, never to be seen again. We're certainly not going to go start deploying traps and hog boxes and ordering bait, etc. If it's not going to be a long-term prospect. There's got to be a cost-benefit analysis in terms of your time and investment and the person. You know, we're only human. We don't have time all the time to hang out and watch the pigs as much as we would like. The camera gives us a lot of information, direction, movement, presence of other fauna, native fauna perhaps, or other invasive species, which is all the sort of stuff you need before you can make an informed decision about the control. And critically, what the makeup of the group of pigs is. Quite often it's, welfare considerations around removing adults from the landscape or lactating sows, for instance. With ground shooting, it's really hard to get the piglets, and you do have a welfare obligation if you've moved a lactating female from the population of any animals. Really, best practice would be to make sure that the piglets meet a humane dispatch. It's quite tricky to do with pigs. Some of you might be excellent pig wranglers out there. I'm certainly not. So one of the benefits of using a system like Hog On is that it can account for the piglets as well. And we need to be able to confirm that the piglets are actually eating from the box. So we'll look at some of that piglet activity in a little bit, and it would be remiss of me not to discuss what the active ingredient is in a hog on process. So it's really cleverly marketed, MESN feral pig bait. It's available without a permit, so that's a huge benefit to it in a way. Means that there's a few less barriers to accessing and using it without necessarily having to rely on an endorsed licensed pest management technician, those sorts of things. It's incredibly effective. I think there may be a bit of misconception that it's a selective poison. It is certainly not. So I'll just let people know that, like any choice for lethal control, you've got to weigh up your risk analysis and decide whether it's the right tool for you. And hopefully whoever your local Landcare group or your RBG or NRM or Department of Primary Industries group can help you with that choice if you're not already across it. We find in our area, we tend not to have to stray too far from an active feeding site to recover any felled pigs or any pigs that do succumb to it. They do tend to drop within 30 to 200 metres of the box on a successful deployment. And there's some of the similar benefits to using, say, a 1080 with its they're highly water soluble, so it breaks down rapidly in the environment. And there's the usual rules. I think Jackie, referring to your 1080 baiting window for fox management being February to April, is very similar in our area as well. And naturally rain not being a great time to put out your 1080 baits. It's no different with the sodium nitrite. However, there is some added benefit if you were courting the shoulders of those seasons and there's still a bit of rain around. The poison can be a little bit protected from the elements by virtue of the hog box, but the whole thing you want them to do is to lift up and eat inside the box. So there's no residual risk to off target from environmental degradation, but there are risks to using it. We've seen pigs, they eat like pigs. There's time to time they can fling little bits and pieces outside of the box. So that's just something to be aware of. The design of the box, I'm not sure if you can see those little partitions in there, fit one of the packets in perfectly, and you bolt it in with wing nuts. So you're essentially securing the bait trays in there, making it pretty hard to get the packets out. and there's a little bit of a telescopic pole inside the hog box that you can gradually open and close. You can target it, you can cater that to your program, to the movements of your animals. So, gee whiz, I'm talking really slowly now, and it's 10 past, and I want to make sure that I get through this. So, conditions of use, needs to be deployed in a hog box, or I think there's another product called a hog hopper, but they're a bit bigger. They're more for if you were trying to introduce this product in a active paddock, for instance. If you couldn't exclude your own stock, there's methods that you could deliver it so that your livestock aren't accessing it and keeping it out of their access. It has some rules. You can't put it within 20 metres of any flowing water, 50 metres from a boundary. That's really critical when we're running programs with neighbouring state forests. We have to be, advise all these T's and C's, which are all part of the label use and the safety data sheet. And there's some disposal considerations after you've run a program. Certainly, we just love to bury stuff, don't we? Bury it or burn it used to be the old adage. You certainly don't want to have, you don't want to bring this stuff back to the house and just chuck it in your kitchen bin. You just definitely want to make sure you're disposing of it in a way that's not going to be accessible to any other species, domestic or native. And you must put some signage up, which comes with the product when you use it. So just a little bit of a timeline of how quickly, or sort of, this is the optimum window for when you might find from deployment to removal of the animals. So this is a case study from earlier in the year. So we started pre-feeding, or encouraged the landholder to start pre-feeding late April, and we placed the fermented barley. We use flake barley, as I mentioned earlier, but in cropping country they may choose to use wheat or clipped oats or windfall apples, anything like that you can encourage the pigs to come and have a go at. So, and bring their friends, tell your friends, we always say to them. They can get very reliant and very habituated to the pre-feeding, to the point where we've had landholders come to dump a bit of fresh batch of pre-feed, and they've seen the mob of pigs coming down through the bracken. So that's an interesting thing. Those pigs are there expecting dinner much earlier than when they might have discovered the bait in the middle of the night, the pre-feed. So we introduced the hog boxes after we're happy that the pigs are on the camera for a few days getting into the pre-feed. In the early days, we would run around and drop the hog boxes very early, but I'll show you some videos towards the back end where pigs can be quite wary of them because it's a new structure in the landscape. They've got all those other reasons to be scared of traps and star pickets and bits of Rio mesh, so why would they not be frightened of a new box? So if we can get them comfortable there, slowly introduce the hog box, maybe in a dormant state, maybe no star pickets. It's really up to the pigs, and the camera tells us everything we need. Once we confirm the animals are eating pre-feed from the ground, we'll transition that into the hog box, and we'll use that little telescopic pole to keep it open and encourage the pigs to eat from that. Then over a couple of nights, we'll start to close the lid. The money shot is when we can see the pigs lifting the heavy lid of the hog box by themselves. And so what hopefully this video shows, and this is relevant to the little piglets, if anyone's played around with hog boxes, the magnetic catch is pretty tough, and the boxes are, they probably weigh about 12 kilos or something like that, but kangaroos, critical weight range, native fauna, mammals, things like that, have struggled in the trials with the boxes to open them. So hence that's the requirement to using the sodium nitrite that is deployed in one of these. But the pigs, it directly manipulates their ability to root using their nose, and it sort of plays right into their biology. So now we can see we've got a piglet eating, which is great. We wouldn't deploy or ever get close to the placebo or the active phase without knowing that pigs are eating from the box. And this is a bit of a tight angle here, but that's a really good shot. And look at that little pig doing a front flip. There he goes, to get over into the box. They're very excited about it once they're keen. And this is a great video because we can tell that they're all eating. So we're pretty confident that when we deploy the active bait, that they're all going to get a lethal dose. So what's happening here? Let's go forward a bit. Just let that one play out. There's other habits we've observed where some boars come in and they're very greedy and they may actually try and commandeer the majority of the feed themselves. That can be quite tricky in terms of encouraging a family sounder to feed. Pros and cons. I think it's worth talking about the visual impact of the hog boxes in the landscape. Certainly not as scary looking as a trap, but this pig's definitely not super keen on it. And over the sequence of these couple of videos, this would have been an example of a program where we wouldn't have gone to the deployment stage because A, it's only one pig, and B, very, very, very wary of getting into that feed. Yep. Repeat. So you can see in this image the grain or the flake barley that's already in the box. Pretty sure that was as close as this pig ever got to. And she's a sow, so, and she may indeed be with piglet as well. Where are we? Let's go to that. Close to feeding. So can you hear her munching in that one? Where we find we get the best results with this program is repeat users who have basically loaned a couple of hog boxes from our group. They've bought their own stockpile of flake barley and molasses. They've got a couple of cameras. They'll tell us when they've got cameras or pigs active on the camera. They'll set their hog box, their pre-feed up. They've trained the animals beautifully to come there, and they'll only reach out to our group when it comes time to access the placebo and the bait product. I think it was a bit remiss. I didn't actually talk about the fact that the requirement of using hog on is that once you've confirmed the pigs can lift the box, eat from it, you will actually substitute the grain with the dummy bait, which is a peanut matrix placebo, which is non-toxic, and it's designed to taste exactly the same as the active sodium nitrite bait. So there's a palatability trading, which means that you can alter the pre-feed in scenarios to try and get them used to it. But what's one of the shortcomings? If your pig don't like the taste of peanut butter, it's not going to eat the placebo. It's not going to certainly not going to go for the active bait. So that's a definite consideration. And there's examples in our ops area where we've deferred from going to the active product stage because the pigs aren't touching the placebo. So that's a really good option for us to sort of go, no go. Because what's another shortcoming of using something like sodium nitrite? It's quite expensive to access. So because of its availability and its design, to try and keep the sodium nitrite in the bait packets stable, it's very, very sensitive to temperature changes and moisture. So those packets are hermetically sealed, but we all know what it's like. It's very hard to get your deployment from the eastern states over to WA. I mean, we're pretty lucky in the southwest peri-urban space, but very tricky getting it, say, to the Midwest or the Wheatbelt, and not knowing what's going to happen over that transit period. And yeah, we have had the odd batch already been corked, as I would have said in a previous life in the wine industry. It's not usable. And the thing about the sodium nitrite is it does have quite an offensive odour once the product has turned. And it's certainly not going to be palatable to pigs. So there's a massive risk that if you use a dodgy product, or you use a product that might have gone beyond its use by, or etc., you might actually be introducing another. You're building a better mouse instead of encouraging the pig. You're actually discouraging it. So there's certainly challenges to use it. It's not bespoke and fit for all. The beauty of using a 1080 product, for instance, is that you could apply it to whatever feed of choice. Palatability doesn't really come into it for the pigs. So there's pros and cons to everything. Look, it's reasonably costly to deploy a hog box in terms of if you're looking at your staff labour or your volunteer time, getting the cameras right. If you're not in the market of having really cool 4G cameras that can remote monitor, it's costly to go out there time after time, check your imagery. These are all challenges common across the Landcare space, I would imagine. But the box itself, there are $500 so there's a capital investment, and the bait price, as I've said before, isn't cheap. So how we try and manage it is by essentially gauging the process and making sure that we pull out of the program or discourage that active deployment of bait in favour of another control. And that might be engaging a ground contractor to go and install a trap or put a trap a little bit off-site from where we're pre-feeding to try and coax towards that. Or maybe it will be necessary to then go and look at a different bait product. So a whole business isn't just to run it for the sake of running it. We want to run it with an outcome that the land manager has seen a reduction in their asset damages from pigs year on year, and they certainly will need to be integrating with other control methods. It works. It does work, and if we can create a bit of a buffer for properties, get a few neighbours on board, one say running a trapping program, one running a hog on program, other one may have smaller numbers and might be happy to do the ground shooting. That's great because it's going to buffer those surrounding properties from the impact of the pigs, hopefully pick them up on the way through. All right, okay, well, I've decided obviously to cut myself off short there, and there's probably a million things I haven't said, but thanks for listening today, and yeah, I better stop talking and see if there's questions.
Oh, that's actually perfect timing. Thank you so much, Kate. Does anyone have any questions for Jacquie? Because she's got to head off first. Anything fox related or anything rabbit related or anything Wheatbelt specific related? Any management options? I guess firstly, Jacquie, what do you think? Obviously, the integrated pest management approach is the best way of doing it, like a multi-pronged, but what do you think is kind of the most effective solution, I guess, specifically with foxes, would you say?
Foxes respond well to shooting, but they also respond very well to baiting with 1080. And I mean, I know some people are not happy with 1080, but if you manage it the correct way and you bury the baits and mark whether you've buried or tethered the baits, then there's less non-target species uptake. And also, if you follow it through the program properly and go out and collect the baits again. But yeah, they're both the most effective methods.
Yep. Can I ask you a bit of a pie in the sky question? What if you could like create anything technology based to help out your efforts, like, you know, like something like the Felixa or something like that? Can you think of anything crazy that you could think would really help with like fox or rabbit management?
Yeah, that's a good question without notice.
You can say whatever you want.
Felixa would be wonderful. A virus, I mean, we were talking earlier before we started about the contraceptive. If there was a gene-inserted contraceptive that wasn't going to affect other non-target species for rabbits and foxes, that would be fantastic. Yeah.
We've got a question for you as well, Jacquie, from Noni. She says she's currently using 1080 in the Wheatbelt with some effectiveness for foxes. She says, as she knows the location of some dens, would the phos toxin be a sensible option? Can't destroy the dens with machine as they are within a TEC woodland, mature trees.
Yes, Noni, you would be able to use phos toxin. We got into a discussion recently with a work colleague about perhaps there is some changes in the regulations for using phos toxin. But if you approach your nutrients or elders, they'll be able to give you the guidelines on using the phos toxin. But basically, you block the hole. You need to know where they go in and out. And you need to be able to block the hole with damp newspaper usually, and then throw the tablets in with moisture and block it and get out of the way so you don't poison yourself. So, yeah. But there is scope for that. And if I think, Noni, you regularly attend Wheatbelt NRM videos and stuff, so you can email me if you want to get some details on that further.
Cool. Thanks, Jacquie.
That's all right.
I imagine that the shooting season coming up will be pretty intense with the rabbits because there's been so many rabbits this season, hasn't there?
Yes, there has been. And I've just seen that someone's mentioned that phos toxin is illegal for foxes. That's changed too. I'm very sorry if I've given out misinformation. Rabbits, yes, And the problem is a lot of people want to use, I've been approached this year by a lot of people wanting to use calicivirus, but this is the worst time of year for using the calicivirus because you get, hopefully I'm not saying more out of date information, but you get the young become immune to it and then they can breed on and pass on that immunity.
Yeah.
The best time for using rabbit control is in the autumn with calicivirus as well as shoot. And the other thing is that rabbits won't eat. They won't do the pre-feed because there's a lot of green stuff around.
Yeah. Got a couple of questions. Noni says calcivirus not suitable for us as too few rabbits. And then Lacey Ford says, have you been doing any immunity testing in the rabbits in your region?
No. That's a good question. And the answer is no, we haven't. I can find out about that though.
Awesome. And yeah, just a heads up, everybody, we'll pop Jackie and Kate's emails in the post-presentation resources. So if you've got any follow-up questions or conversations that you want to have as well, we can do that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you. And Kate, I really enjoyed all the footage of the pigs. That's such an incredible resource to have.
Yes.
But it's so interesting about the variation within the population of being quite hesitant towards the feed boxes and the feed in particular. And it sounds like there's a lot of different factors that lead into whether the pigs actually are inquisitive enough to use the feed box to take the bait in the first place. I was quite surprised by that. Okay. Thank you, Jackie.
Thanks, Jackie.
Sorry, I've got to go. Sorry.
You're all good. Thank you so much for today.
See you, mate.
Thank you.
Yes, Eve, back to your question. Yeah, I think over-reliance on any one control mechanism is going to breed or going to train a form of aversion. I Googled this the other day, not to do with my tax return, was it aversion, evasion? It's just the nature of the beast. And I sort of feel like I'm harping onto tropes from the turn of the century, but if you build a better mousetrap, you build a better mouse. And I'm certainly not the expert on pig ecology and behaviour. I've had a great 5 years hanging out, looking at what pigs do and learning more and more. But I'm constantly mindful of our influence as humans in the management of feral pigs, and so it's heavily favour or lean heavily on, I think it's Braysher's 7 principles of pest management, that all pest is a human construct, as in we give it a name, we deem it a pest, we put policies around it. It doesn't know that what it's doing is wrong. In fact, does such a good job ecologically of what it's doing. It's doing exactly the right thing in Australia. It's just invasive, it's not meant to be here. So pigs being very cagey and intelligent creatures, great sense of smell, they will certainly develop hesitation to, I've seen them to traps, trap installations. The pre-feed at this stage, relevant to what Jackie said about trying to get rabbits to eat a bait product, all dependent on what's available in the landscape for them at the time.
That's so true.
Yeah, so flake barley doesn't work for everyone. Mangium up, apples. There's other commercial products available that can fit into hog boxes. So there is a 1080 packet you can get, but you would need a permit for that, and obviously you have to meet the requirements under the Code of Practice in WA to access it. But it's a shellfish matrix, so it's not, we don't have any coastal, apart from the city of Bunbury and Capel, where we do have a satellite mob of pigs actually in the Capel operations district. They ain't going to eat shellfish in the forests around Mumballup, you know what I mean? So you're already setting yourself up for failure by maybe trying that. Who knows? It might be something that if I get on crazy and on a whim, and if in this space we ever end up with surplus operational budget, but I think we all know that's not the case, might be something to look at. But so 1080 is a great tool to manage out the visual aversion and also try and trick them into eating something that they're going to eat. So if you can access that, I'd highly recommend people look into it as a control option.
Yeah, and on that point, I guess you said that you were a part of the WA Feral Pig Advisory Group. Was there I guess, any conversations into innovating into management kind of options into the future? And I guess just like you said, acknowledging that as management options change, the pests change and they learn, and you kind of always got to be on the front foot a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and certainly wasn't on the technical forefront of revolutionary new pig management tool, unfortunately, Eve. But I still think that a lot of the policy and the management of pigs comes back to people's behaviours. I think there's a lot more work being done into stakeholder engagement analyses of how to engage with different cohorts of the human race to try and get them on board with a certain principle, even if it's the passive nature of how we've got to manage invasive species, the housekeeping elements, things that we're all guilty of. I'm sitting in home at the moment in not even 1 foot of square space in Bunbury, and I know that there will be mice out at the bins at the moment because we probably forgot to put the bins out last week. Little things like that, do you know what I mean? We lay our floors bare, and the reason that pest is there is because I've probably not done my due diligence with thing X. But it's also about just learning. Like I say, we learn every day in this space, and the more people you meet, there'll be a clever idea. You'll just talk to. We've got to keep talking to our neighbours. It seems like the biggest disconnect in terms of cross tenure management is trying to bury any old prejudices or biases we may have about. We all get misty-eyed and think about the glory days of the Agricultural Protection Board and things like that. Wouldn't that be wonderful if there was that much money available in the state for the government just to take care of everything for us? But the nature of the Biosecurity and Agriculture Management Act is no, it comes down to us. And I think that's great. As a project manager, who wants to go on Crown land and try and get through that approvals process and manage and mitigate everything down to X? By the time you actually get to the ground control, there's your budget gone. Do you know what I mean? If you've got a risk appetite and you're aware of the risks, you can control a lot more on your own private land and have much better outcome. But it does cost you time and money. And,
Absolutely.
And I think there's broader conversations to be had about whether people's appetite. In the urban centres, you'd quite quickly get on the phone to Osmic or something like that if you had a termite problem or a rodent problem. It's just seems very unthought of that people would have the confidence or want to expend the resource on engaging a licensed pestie to come and have a look at your rabbits. And there's still going to be limitations to what they can do. But I think we're just trying to get people thinking about that a bit more. Because imagine how much value all of us as land carers could add if we had a portion of our grant funding money, etc., to put towards a private contribution. And then, wouldn't that just make the LGAs happy as well? They go, oh my gosh, we have so much more money left over and less complaints. But and I guess it's also about what the asset is and what importance it is to us. So can we cop a few less petunias in our front lawn for rabbits or something? Can we let a patch of lawn die and it doesn't look that pretty, but I know that it's going to stop rabbits wanting to come up under the house now? These are all really tricky, big questions. Yeah,
absolutely. And is there much financial support available for landholders to put these kind of biosecurity controls on their property?
Yeah, I would look, without treading on any toes here. I think there is, particularly if you're part of a recognised biosecurity group. Because that's what directly we're funded for. It's not necessarily about a one-to-one. You've contributed to the rate, so you get that number of dollars of your annual fee back in service, because we know that doesn't work. It's about looking at the socialist element of the loss management versus the capitalist approach, I think, because it's really easy if you're a primary producer, you may want to capitalise your gains, but you certainly want to socialise your losses and put them out. I think if we can reverse that and then say, look at how much I've actually saved from this bit of investment, and it only cost me this much, and now because there's so little pig pressure, I don't have to spend as much every season. You'll watch it year on year get smaller and smaller, and you'll just have it totally under control.
So true.
Yeah.
I wonder if any of the participants have any questions. If so, maybe do a little hand pop-up icon. But I just want to ask you the same question, Kate. Can you think of any cool, futuristic pest control ideas?
Look, I don't know about anyone else here, but we get some fun emails from time to time from private members they've had a brain, they've gone and conceptualized some I'm not backing anything. I'm just saying something that came in the inbox this year. The idea of we've got AI recognition for Felixia, for instance, for targeting feral cats. People love the idea of having some, say, AI sort of darting system, or I'm not going to use the word firearm system because it's very much video gaming. But people have talked about those things for a while. We have so much remote sensing technology and cameras, and is there a way to make that the actual control? But I think in terms of my I really Terminator 2 is one of my favorite movies, and I think Skynet I equate to AI. I'm sorry if I'm showing my 80s-ness here, but I just the thought of having AI-led turrets that are meant to focus on pigs is just, but that's there's clever ideas out there. Different trapping systems, like we've been fortunate enough to have a loan of the pig brig, and I think there's some representation here from Peel Harvey in the chat asking the Kelly questions. And we're finding in certain parts of the area it's working great. In other areas it's absolutely ineffective. And it's such a to set it up and deploy it. It's why it's it would be I'd be like Caesar in my ivory tower going, yes, go for the brig or the trap, no, or yes or no to hog on. And so that does make me not liked sometimes amongst maybe the project team or even some but we're doing it to ensure continuity of funding and not deploying it for the sake of deploying it, I suppose.
Because it sounds like each area needs such a specific kind of management option dependent on like the environment and the weeds present and water sources and
each property, even not even
each property.
Each property. There's we've just wrapped a collaborative program we did with Southwest NRM on a bunch of properties in the Preston Loudon area, and you've got properties there that are just beautifully conservation estate. Not suitable for line of sight for ground shooting, or there's a residence just in the worst spot, or the hectareage meets the volume land parcel size for a 1080, but the block's so narrow that you can't ever not be 50 20 too close to a waterway. So it's like the suite of options and then knocking them off, but trying not to preempt that until I think just the pre-feed and the cameras need to happen for any sort of thing that moves around. I think it doesn't matter whether it's a possum in your roof or anything else. I think before you want to try and, if your goal is to remove it, you need to see what it is. And they're not going anywhere, unfortunately. It's not, I keep forgetting to say we can't eradicate feral pigs in Australia and certainly not in WA, but we can exclude them, or we can go for local eradication and pushing them out, make it problems for somebody else, and then hopefully get them on the journey. So, but
and it will be so interesting to see how the space evolves over time with changes in technology, and like we were talking about like contraceptive methods and Noni asks, is there somewhere I can send photos of tracks, footprints, diggings, etc. to get a reliable ID?
Well, if someone else may jump in the chat. You could probably try. A lot of people don't like the platform, but we don't mind using Feral Scan, but that's not necessarily an ID service. But if there's a local group operational that has a Feral Scan boundary set up, they may get that data and be able to help. We tend to, or if I don't know so much. There's so much I don't know. So I tend to send a lot of pictures of things to DPIRD. That's exactly right, Lacey. My pest guide. I've started playing around a bit with what's the iNaturalist. Has anyone? Yeah,
you can definitely upload those things to that. I'm not sure how efficient and effective it would be with that yet. Also, I'm just having a look now, Noni, because there's a really good Facebook group for weeds, like Weeds of WA. So I was thinking whether there'd be kind of like a feral animal identification Facebook group. I imagine there might be. I'm gonna have a little look.
Yeah, it's very tricky when you start posting animal content on Facebook, and everybody becomes an expert. Oh, is there tracks and scats, Lacey? Trust you being in that group. Amazing. Yeah.
Well, that's good to know.
If you can get in touch with a local, find out who's an industry operator, who's a Department of Health accredited vertebrate pest contractor, and do your own due diligence. Ask the questions. Have they got their techies license? Have they got an endorsement for X, Y, and Z? They may be very experienced and they may be quite happy to field phone calls about it, because one, it may inform some work for them in the future, but it also might, you know, they might be able to come and have a look. But yeah, they certainly, the rates aren't cheap, but if you have a good relationship with somebody, then you can start build programs around it. But yeah, I think I'm going to have to look at that Tracks and Scats Facebook now. I know it's quite exciting, hasn't it? Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we'll wrap it up unless anyone else has got any questions. Don't think so. But yeah, thank you, Kate. Thanks so much for presenting today. That was such an interesting presentation. And that discussion afterwards was so interesting as well. So yeah, as I've said before, emails will be sent out after today, as well as any resources that Kate or Jackie would like to send through. If you're not already a member of the WA Landcare Network, we'd love to have you. I think everybody is here, but that's awesome. We also have our AGM coming up on the 9th of December. And aside from the usual proceedings, we'll be having an update on our newly formed Parliamentary Friends of Landcare, which has 5 political representatives from across the sphere. We'll have an update on our new Landcare Expertise Exchange portal and our new website, they're both so close to being completed, and we can't wait to share them with you. And last but not least, we'll hear from a couple of member groups about some good news stories from the year and what they've been up to. And we'd love to see you there. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this afternoon, and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks for having me, guys. I enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Thank you.